Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Charlie. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Bhanu. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for again joining our discussion this morning. This webinar is on the topic of proposed changes to NFPA 70E, upcoming revision cycle 2024. This is purely from the few changes that we took, like about 10 of the changes from 2024 first draft report. Charlie will be talking about those and also will be taking any questions. And at the end, we'll also walk you through how to put the public comments for this first draft report that's been published in the 70E or NFPA website as well. So without any delay, I'm going to go to the next slide and read through the disclaimer because this is very important. Because Charlie is a technical committee voting member in 70E, so I just want to make sure that the views and opinions expressed during this presentation, including any responses to the questions and such, are those of the speakers based on their professional experience and personal capacity, and does not reflect the position of the organizations or other technical committees they represent. And the recommendations and any suggestions provided during this webinar, again, are purely for informational purposes only and cannot be used in the real-world applications without a detailed analysis and the written authorization and consent from the presenters. So with that, I will go to the next slide. So we picked like 9 to 10 changes, what we thought that's relevant or that's kind of very important from our standpoint. And we're going to talk through those changes. And as Charlie is talking through the changes, we'll also take the questions from you. And please use the webinar dashboard as you go through this presentation and type in your questions and comments. We will try to answer them as the time permits at the end. Okay, so without delay, Charlie, let's go to the next slide. Go ahead, Charlie.
All right. The really good news is this is a very small number of changes in this, at least the first revision. There were only 335 inputs submitted. Out of those, 166 revisions happened. And a lot of those revisions were changes that have been made because of the NEC manual of style. Now, the National Electrical Code, the NFPA 70E, has what's called a manual of style. And what that means is, okay, the document has to be laid out a certain way. It has to be worded a certain way. And one of the things that was added in the manual of style for the NEC and 70E was every article had to have a scope. And a lot of articles in 70E didn't have a scope. And so, for example, 90.1 purpose, the purpose of 70E was renumbered to 90.2 because the scope was added to the document because of the 2020 NEC style manual that does require the first section of each article to have a scope. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, how is this manual of style? Does the manual of style say the wording, the sentences in 70E and the National Electrical Code have to be extremely long and boring and all of that? Well, it seems like the manual of style says that, but no, it doesn't. And of course, we've got a new National Electrical Code coming out this September, and next September the new 70E will come out. And when I teach a lot of custom seminars, and when I'm teaching, I'll ask people in the class, do you have an old copy of either the National Electrical Code or NFPA 70E? And of course, I'm teaching electricians and maintenance people, engineers, so I have a lot of hands go up, and I'll tell them, don't ever throw away an old copy of the NEC or 70E. If you know anybody who's having trouble sleeping, you can sell that to them as a sleep aid. And a few weeks ago, my wife and I were at a pharmacy. We were walking down one of the aisles, and it said sleep aids, and they were selling right there on the top shelf as sleep aids copies of the National Electrical Code. Okay, they weren't, but you get the idea. They could. All right, and a number of these types of revisions were in informational notes. There was this manual style had requirements the way the informational notes had to be written. So out of that 166, I haven't gone through and counted, but probably half of those are because of the manual style. Now the deadline, these, you can look at the first revision on NFPA's website, and you can submit a public comment to this first draft. And the deadline for this is May 31st. And we'll probably mention that again because getting into it in a little bit, there's one of these that I know the disclaimer said that this is just my opinion and it's not the committee's opinion. Well, one we get into later should be the committee's opinion, and hopefully with your help we can get this changed. And we'll talk. Bhanu and I'll talk about this in detail coming up.
Yeah. So just before you go to the next slide, again, as we said, the first draft report has been published, and as Charlie mentioned, the first draft report gives basically the proposed changes to the text as the committee proposed, and this is a great opportunity for everyone who gets impacted with these changes can go into NFPA and type in their comments, because you are the ones who will be using the standards, need to comment at this stage to ensure that how this language will affect the work that you do on a day in, day out basis, so that the committee hears those and those things will be taken into consideration before they finalize the last level of language changes to that standard itself. And again, this is like a 3 years revision cycle. It's a long process, and it takes 3 years, right, Charlie? It's 2021-24. The process starts like immediately once they publish the document. Immediately, the first phase of this will start, and then it goes through a huge iterative process before things gets published. So absolutely, please make sure that you don't need to pay anything to do this, to do the public comments. All you need is basically nfpa.org. You need to log into the website and create an account, an user account, so that you can go and look through the 70E and the next edition specific tab within that, which I will walk you through if the time permits today, so that you can go and create an account and input your comments on that specific inputs based on what your thoughts are. Okay. So with that, we'll go to the next slide, Charlie. All right, global change. Go ahead.
Article 100, which most, if not all of you know that Article 100 is definitions, both in 70E and the NEC. Well, there are a lot of what looks like new definitions that have been added to Article 100, but all of these definitions are not new. All definitions in accordance with the 2020 style manual, all definitions have to go to Article 100. If you remember previously, what the NEC and what 70E did, if a word or term was only used in one article, it would be defined in that one article, and that it was always the .2 section. And so, and with the NEC, for example, swimming pools had a lot of words and terms just for Article 680 in the code book that were just related to swimming pools. Now what happens is every term and word that is defined in NEC or 70E will be in Article 100. If it is just used in one article, that article number will be in parentheses right after the definition. This is a quick and easy change. The term leather protectors was changed to just protectors. The term leather was dropped out. So here's an example, and it appears all in the code. So there's probably 10 places of these, 8 to 10, and table 310. Table 130.5G and the footnote under the table. This is the footnote. Rubber insulating gloves with protectors provide arc flash protection in addition to shock protection. Higher class rubber insulating gloves with protectors due to their, and it goes on. So all they're doing is they've deleted the term leather because it opens the door, and people have been using some other types of gloves anyway to protect the rubber. That's what the outer glove is to do. So there might be there are some non-leather gloves or even some arc-rated gloves that could be worn over the rubber insulated glove. Normal operating condition. This had come out several editions ago, and it was great when it came out, because what this term and what these rules meant before we had normal operating condition, just to turn on a circuit breaker or a disconnect switch, even if everything was closed up, we had to wear Category 0 clothing. Now, Category 0 was not arc rated, but it had to be a long sleeve shirt and long pants of a certain material weight. So if I was working in a plant, in a facility, and I'm needing to turn off a breaker, even with the panel board door on, everything is in great condition. If I were to turn that breaker on, I couldn't do it wearing short sleeve shirts. I would have to put on a long sleeve shirt just to be able to turn on or off a breaker. Well, the committee came out with normal operating condition. If all of these conditions are satisfied, then no PPE at all is required. Well, until this coming edition, if this goes through, there were only 6 conditions. The equipment had to be properly installed. It had to be properly maintained. What was one new in the last edition, the equipment had to be used in accordance with instructions, which if you're a guy out there, you know we don't like reading and complying with instructions, but the equipment had to be used in accordance with instructions included in the listing and labeling and in accordance with manufacturer's instructions. To be a normal operating condition, it also, the equipment doors had to be closed and secured. Now the equipment door, sometimes there was confusion on this going, wait a minute, if the door to the breakers is closed, I can't turn the breaker on or off. That's not the door it's talking about. That door is just closing, making a good cover to the front, maybe even able to lock the front cover off. It's talking more like an industrial control panel door, or even a door to a breaker box that it would be on hinges and could swing open. All equipment covers had to be in place and secured, and there has to be no evidence of impending failure. You're looking inside a disconnect switch or opening a panel board. If you're an electrician, a maintenance person, usually when you open these things, you have a keen eye for looking. Is there anything discolored? Is the insulation near the terminal, is it discolored? Well, one of the things that the new condition they're saying that they put in this draft is the equipment has to be rated for the available fault current.
So Charlie, here is my thoughts. I mean, this is one thing that we didn't agree on, the language, right? So the equipment is, I mean, I read through the 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7, the old 6 steps, right? 6 criteria. Those are all operational criteria, correct? So the equipment is installation is an operational criteria, maintenance is operational criteria, the doors and everything around that is operational. So my only question here is, maybe the audience also can chime in. If you have any questions or comments, you can type in on that. The rating is a design requirement. The equipment is rated for the available fault current, is not in the operation guy's hands, right? When you're performing the task, that is completely out of your control once the system has been installed and commissioned. So my question is does it need to be rated for available fault current, or does it need to be labeled or the equipment shall have a label that provides available fault current on that, which becomes a requirement. I'm not sure. So what are your thoughts, Charlie, on that?
Well, I agree. It's going to be hard, if not impossible, probably impossible, for an electrician or maintenance person to know that information, to know the available fault current, to know if the rating of the equipment. And this is the equipment has to, in accordance with the National Electrical Code, the equipment has to be rated for the fault current. So that's more of an installation standard, and I don't yet see how a maintenance person, electrician, is going to. Wait, I can. Looking at this, and I can see some people may say, well, I can't see that this is normal operating condition because I can't confirm what the available fault current is. I might be able to open the equipment up to see there may be a label or a plaque on the front of it. If it's just a panel board, I don't think there will be. If it's switchgear, if it's a big switchboard, there probably will be a plaque on the front. But I don't think I don't think this will be on a panel board. And so I see this as
my only concern is basically equipment is rated for the available fault current. The electrician or the worker is going to be in front of the panel will not have any visibility to that unless otherwise somebody has done the system level of analysis and they have the available fault current that's been defined. And other than the label, they will not have a clear understanding. That's my thoughts. Probably audience also can comment and see how it impacts, because it's going to be difficult for someone to ensure the equipment is rated for the available fault current to have this operation. Just my thoughts on that. Okay.
Well,
go ahead.
Right. In order to be normal operating condition, it has to satisfy all of these conditions. And someone doing the work, that means that almost takes us back to wearing PPE to turn a breaker on or a disconnect switch on. Okay, let's get fully suited up to turn a breaker on or off, because we don't know the available fault current. So we're going to have to always be suited up. And I don't know, this is, I can see there didn't seem to be much controversy. I don't remember the controversy in the meeting, but this is this can be quite a I think this can be a problem. And if our listeners think this can be a problem, make a comment and tell why you think it'll be a problem. If it needs to stay in there, just let it go. If it needs to come out, just Bhanu wasn't moving enough and his lights went out. I love it when I see that happen. So, but anyway, if you don't like that, make a comment to the NFPA committee on 70E, and we'll see. It's the next meeting will be in August, but you have until the end of May. Yeah, don't come up June 31st. Oh, I want to make some comments. Too late.
And also, other than comment, you can also propose if the wording has to be revised to say something else around the same line. That could also be mentioned there, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the next slide, Charlie. All right, let's go.
We want the best safety document we can get. And it takes a lot of people to help put this together. All right, and in 120.5A1, their informational note, and I think this was just moved down from the main text. Locating sources of supply. No, this is a new informational note. Locating the sources of supply could include identifying situations where a neutral conductor continues to carry current after phase conductors have been de-energized. Well, all right. So if it's a new facility within the last 3 to 6 years or so, then, or maybe even 9 years, then all of the phase conductors that used for a multi-wire circuit, the phase conductors that utilize the same neutral have to have a common trip handle circuit breaker. But before that, they didn't have to. There are a lot of retail facilities out there where and even in industrial facilities where rows of lights, they had phase A, B, C, and one neutral, but they weren't tied together, and they may or may not even been directly with each other. And so if someone's turning off, oh, I need circuit 22 turned off, so they turn off 22. But if circuits 24 and 26 are also energized and they use that same neutral, then there could be neutral current at a point where someone is working. So it's a good, it is a good informational note to put in there to have us think about, okay, is this a multi-wire circuit, and are we turning off all the conductors or all the energy source that uses that neutral?
So Charlie, by the way, can you also just go a little bit more on the difference between the main body text and the informational node? What's the difference between that?
All right, this is in 120.5. And it's one of it's telling us things that we need to do to put the equipment into an electrically safe work condition, using up-to-date line drawings, considered a primary reference. Let's say this one actually, the 120, there was, in 120, it didn't have a scope. So this, where 120.5 now is electrically safe work condition, before it was not. So this may have been 120.4 before. And it's just telling us using up-to-date line drawings have to be considered to use them as a primary source for the information. If up-to-date drawings are not available, employers shall be responsible for making sure that there's an equally effective method for locating all the energy that someone is going to be near or around. All right, so this, and when I'm teaching, I'll say, okay, we're going to look at our quote up-to-date drawings, and we're going to look at the panel schedule, and so we're wanting to turn off a certain circuit. We go to the legend in the panel board, and it says turn off circuits 11, 13, 15. And so we turn that off. Do we trust our life to that? And of course, I can't see anybody except Bhanu, but I know you're shaking your head out there. No, you don't trust anybody when trust anything like that that's labeled. But that's a great place to start. That is a great place to start. And the informational note just gives a little insight. If there's a neutral, and if it's a part of a multi-wire circuit or part of a circuit that it's not going to be a problem if that neutral is connected to a 3-pole breaker and you turn the 3-pole breaker off. That is going to, if that's all that neutral wire is feeding, then that circuit will be off as well. But and that's why when we're testing for the absence of voltage, we test phase to phase and phase to ground. Well, if it's a neutral, like we've got 3 hots and a neutral and a ground, then we're going to have to throw our testing of the neutral in there as well.
Cool. Thanks, Shelly. We'll go to the next one. So this is, I think we can spend a lot of time.
This is why Bhanu threw out the disclaimer for this is just Charlie's opinion.
Yep.
All right. And 120.6, this is the section I mentioned in the current edition, the 2021 edition of 70 now. This section is 120.5. Well, because they've added a scope, everything moved down one number. All right, so 120.6, process of establishing, verifying an electrically safe work condition. All right, so we've got 6 steps before this, and we get to this one, and it says use an adequately rated portable test instrument to test each phase conductor or circuit part. Before it just said to test for the absence of voltage. All right, now the wording was added in, test each phase conductor or circuit part at each point of work. Well, you're thinking, oh, what's wrong with that? I could see a lot of problems coming from this. Well, when the proposal, when it was before the first draft, someone submitted this to, and the word each wasn't in there. It used to say just at the point of work. One of the committee members said, well, let's make it at each point of work. All right, the committee statement, their statement was the revision in item 7 clarifies that the point for testing the absence of voltage is done at the actual work location. All right, I have some problems with this. All right, we've got an industrial control cabinet. And for one thing, what does point of work mean? We didn't add a definition in Article 100. So my definition, Bhanu's definition, and your definition, they may not be anywhere close to each other. Bhanu's definition may be, all right, it's in the same cabinet, that's the point of work. I'm thinking, all right, the point of work is the same building. No, I wouldn't do that. But first thing that I think of is the point of work is every device in that cabinet. So we've got an industrial control cabinet. We turn it off. We open it up and test for the absence of voltage at the top, or we use Grace's safe test point, which is an extension of the circuit from inside, and we test for the absence of voltage outside. We open it up, but do we have to, once we open it up, do we have to be fully suited up? All right, so testing for the absence of voltage, let's say we are suited up. We open the cabinet, we've turned it off, locked it out, tagged it out, we've gone through all the other steps. We use our meter, we test the meter on any known voltage source. We test phase to phase and phase to ground, then we test our meter again on any known voltage source at the breaker where it comes in the top, at the disconnect switch where power is coming in, because we de-energized it upstream. Well, in order to work in that whole cabinet, don't we have to do the same thing at every device, at every terminal, at every conductor in that industrial control cabinet? This sounds great. Oh yeah, you should be testing it at the point of work. Well, in each point of work. All right, so we have power coming to a building. The utility company the building's gonna be demolished. The utility company comes out, they cut loose, it is totally gone. And right now, the way it is, a qualified person could go out, and where the power comes in, maybe the service disconnecting means they could open it up. They have to be suited up, of course. They could open it up, testing for the absence of voltage at the first point where it comes in. Well, in accordance with this now, before any device, any conductor, any panel, anything else is touched inside that building, someone has to go through and test for the absence of voltage at every point of work. And so, I don't know, it's, what does point of work mean? And so that's,
Charlie, I just want to interject a couple of thoughts here, right? So I just want to give you, you talked about the change, and I just want to give a background of who has put in the change and what was the background around it. Was one of our Grace Safe Test Points competitor has put this information as a request for the first public inputs. So what was the point was when you extend the terminal, their point was basically, hey, you're not actually verifying at the point of work, you're only verifying at the extension of that terminal or that point of work, right? So basically, in simplest way, if you connect our device, or for that matter, any device in that way, right, it is only going to verify the absence of voltage to where it's been connected. It could be our product or our competitor's product. It's going to be neutral, right? So it's going to be same for all. The devices that you mount outside the door is going to only validate the source or absence of voltage where it is originally connected to inside the panel. So meaning if you're connected our device or other devices in the same UL 1436 device, whenever you push a button or whenever you put a meter outside, it's going to verify where it's connected to. For example, let's take it is on the load side, for instance, right? We verify that load side, make sure the de-energized state is verified using a 3-point test or using absence of voltage tester. You de-energize the system, absolutely good. So at that juncture, you lock it out and then you open the panel. So if you put this at each point of work, then that means, in my view, right, from the operator perspective, you got to still be suited up and then verify at each point of work. A classic example would be, think of an MCC bucket where you throw the disconnect off and you verify this load side of the disconnect to be completely de-energized. So are we good at that point, or do we need to go and check at the thermal relay or your contactor and everything downstream? So where is that end? What is that point of work? That's a question, because given this statement, that's going to require everyone to test at every point, as Charlie was mentioning, without having a clear definition of what is that point of work. That becomes a very subjective term, and that's going to create a lot of difficulty in terms of the workers to perform this absence of voltage test, and they need to be always on suited up. So that's what our thought is. And then, I mean, think about it, how it's going to affect your day in, day out tasks and the lockout tagout. On step 7, same thing, live dead, live test. And even if you're not using any of these products, still that point of work definition at each point of work makes you think that you will be required to test at every point, irrespective of whether the system has been logged out and tagged out.
All right, let me give you another example. You need to change a motor out, and there is a disconnect switch within 4 feet of the motor. You've got seal tight going down to the motor, or flex Greenfield, and you know that power is coming from that disconnect to that motor. Well, you turn the disconnect switch off, lock it out, tag it out, you test for the absence of voltage on the load side of that disconnect. Again, testing your meter, testing phase to phase, phase to ground, and testing your meter again. All right, then you close the door, and at that point, the way it is now, we can take our shock and arc rated PPE off and get into that motor. Well, with this wording, does each point now, do we have to, besides doing that, we have to be fully suited up when we take the cover off the housing for the conductors in that motor? And I haven't, and there are motors still out there that have the split bolts on them with rubber and electrical tape. How difficult it is to get in to cut that open while you're fully suited up and wearing rubber gloves, but yet the disconnect is right there. If a qualified person truly is a qualified person, they should know. I mean, that's the definition of qualified person. They should know where to test for the absence of voltage. All right, I understand if you've got you do not have a disconnect switch within sight of the motor. Now, the National Electrical Code, the main rule says you have to have a disconnect switch within sight of a motor. Well, within sight in the NEC is defined as within sight and no further than 50 feet apart. Well, there is an exception saying that if the disconnect switch that's not within sight is lockable in the off position, then you don't have to have a disconnect switch there. Okay, so we've got an MCC bucket that says motor, or maybe we're going to change out a pump 7. So it says pump 7. We turn it off, lock it out, and we go to pump 7. Right here, I absolutely believe, and I've been teaching this forever, you test for the absence of voltage at that pump, at that motor that you're about to work on. And so, but that is different. And this is at each point of work, I could just see being I mean, it's going to be extremely difficult. You're going to have to be suited up a lot of time throughout the day.
So Charlie, the point I would like to ask you is probably you can give an opinion of yours, personal opinion. So
Right.
if this language to be added to the standard at each point of work, then what are your thoughts on the exception number 1? Do you think the same language applies to that as well, or should be applied?
We've got another, I think that may come up in 1 or 2 slides later.
Okay.
I absolutely addressed that. Let's go to the next slide.
All right.
All right, so here's some of the things I've already talked about. What does the point of work mean? Because it is not defined. If they're going to put it in 70E, shouldn't there be a definition? Since there is no definition, is it the line side of every device? Bhanu and I talked about that. Is the point of work the line or the load side of an industrial control panel? Is each point of work different from point of work? So someone on the committee changed it from the point of work to each point of work. Is there a difference? Should there be a definition? If it stays, there has to be a definition. Should this be applied to exception 1 as well? I absolutely think it should. If we have to do this, then any device that meets the exception, and the exception is an absence of voltage tester.
Yeah.
There are, that I know of, 2 companies that make an absence of voltage tester. Now, Grace makes a safe test point, and there's a lot of discussion back and forth that theirs is not an absence of voltage tester. I agree. Bhanu agrees. Grace agrees. Theirs is not an absence of, it's not an absence of voltage tester. It is an extension of the circuit to the outside of the equipment. And it's, the name of it is exactly right, safe test point. And so but going down to the exception, an absence of voltage tester, all right, this wording, if it stays here in the main body, I think it needs to be in the exception.
Yeah,
because
it should be on both the places. It should be on both the places, and as a manufacturer, I think we'll benefit from that, because then that will require the users to put like 5 or 6 on each cabinet at each point of work. So I'll be selling 5 times the quantity as what I'm selling today. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, Bhanu thinks it's great. He doesn't mind it staying. He does mind it staying in there because he wants this document to be realistic and usable.
Usable, absolutely. That's practical as possible.
I'm not concerned about trying to make a lot more sales. The safe test point is great. It's able to, from the outside of the equipment, you don't have to be suited up. But if the absence of voltage tester is connected to one point, typically the line side where power comes into an industrial control cabinet, and if a person has to open this up and test each point of work, each device, each terminal, each conductor, then shouldn't that also apply to the absence of voltage tester? Well, yes, because if we're going to have to do it, then if it just turns it off there, it's technically not, it's testing it at one point, not each point of work. So
I mean, none of these devices have this magic wires or invisible wires that touch every point of work inside the cabinet.
no, and so that's yeah. Now everybody sees why Bhanu really threw out the disclaimer this morning that my opinion is not necessarily the opinion of the committee. So it was a well-deserved disclaimer this morning.
Yeah, again, I think based on what you have heard from me and Charlie, you guys might have your insights as well into that. You can think through your real application on how this wording will really impact your line of work. And please feel free to go to nfpa.org before 31st of May, as Charlie mentioned, and put those comments, please. Okay, so let's go to the next one, Charlie.
All right, this is again things that we've already talked about is point of work, every line side of every component, and I talked about a qualified person. If that's true, they'd have to test every component in an industrial control cabinet, or when it's installed or somewhere along the way, you're going to have to buy half a dozen of safe test points from Bhanu to put in that cabinet, so you can do this all from the outside. Oh, and I did talk about the example where buildings demolished, utility company completely removes the wiring, but yet a qualified person is going to have to test each conductor, each circuit, each device inside that building.
Okay. So limited approach boundary. Go ahead, Charlie.
All right, let me calm down some. There's a small wording change for working is talking about the limited approach boundary. And what it said before, when one or more unqualified persons are working at or close to the limited approach boundary, the alerting methods in 130.8.0 shall be applied to, it used to say advise the unqualified person. And I guess advise may not have been a strong enough word, so the committee or someone came up with the word warn, and that was accepted for this first draft. And then they've taken, because they've already got warn in there, they just struck some of the sentence out. So what it says shall be applied to warn the unqualified person or persons of the electrical hazard and to stay outside the limited approach boundary. I think that's a good change. See, I can be positive on some of these things.
This is interesting one, Charlie. Yeah.
All right. And 130.8M, this is some wording change, and I helped with this a lot, and Paul and Dawn helped with this. This is this section talks about you shall not, if a circuit is tripped or a fuse is blown, you're not supposed to go back in there and reset it or change fuses out. There has been confusion out there, and I've seen it in companies' electrical safety policies, that some companies that say if a circuit trips or a fuse blows, you can reset it one time. Well, where did that come from? And it may have come from this word down there, you'll see it on the right side, repetitive. So this was changed. Let's talk about it now. After a circuit is de-energized by the automatic operation of a circuit protection device, the circuit shall not be manually re-energized until a qualified person or persons determines the equipment and circuit can be safely energized. Now, the repetitive is gone. Manual reclosing circuit breakers or re-energizing circuits to replace fuses shall be prohibited until the fault has been cleared. Now, that I think it's going to next slide there. But the action, this action of this sentence, this rewording, removes the word repetitive, which could, and I know it has been interpreted as to allow replacing fuses or resetting circuit breakers one time. All right, let's go to the next slide. The next slide talks about, I think, the last sentence of 130.8M was moved to the exception. It's still there, but it was, the wording of that was really more of an exception to the main rule. And it said when, and this didn't change, when it's been determined from the design of the circuit and overcurrent device involved that the automatic operation of the device was caused by an overload rather than a fault condition, examination of the circuit or connected equipment shall not be required before the circuit is re-energized. So this allows it to be re-energized for conditions caused by an overload. Now, in the National Electrical Code, and it may be in 70E that they have the terms overload and overcurrent. And sometimes these are easily confused. One of our greats, I've talked with him several times, James Stalcup, and a lot of you may have known or may know of James Stalcup, and I was privileged to teach with him a few times. And when he was teaching the NEC, he would tell a story, the difference between overload and overcurrent, and I've asked Mr. Stalcup if I could use, I always given him credit for this, but it's great. It's very visual. He said when he was in apprenticeship school or engineering school, the teacher was teaching on overload and overcurrent. One of the students said, "Professor, I don't understand. These two sound exactly the same." And so the professor called the student up there and gave him a wire, stripped it on both ends, and had the student hold it on one end, and probably 6 or 8, 10 inches long. And the professor held up a lighter under the other end of the wire. And the student eventually let go of it. And the professor said, that's an example of overload, a slow heating up over a prolonged period of time. Then all of a sudden the professor slapped the student in the face, knocked him down to the ground. And he looked down at him and said, that's an example of overcurrent, a sudden burst of electrical current, of energy that is just extremely large and powerful. And the professor looked down at him and said, do you understand it now, or do you want me to explain it to you again? And again, I love teaching with examples like that. They're very visual.
Charlie, I hope you don't use these methods in your training.
I've always explained it rather than using the method. I don't think an instructor can get away with doing that anymore. Now, Mr. Stalcup is a little bit older than I am, so maybe in his day that was that happened, and you know. So, all right, moving on.
That's a good one. All right, so this is one. Go ahead, Charlie.
Bhanu, I don't think I've ever told you that the difference between overload and overcurrent for Mr. Stalcup.
No.
All right, Informational Annex O. It's been there. The title of the annex, the quote, Informational Annex, has changed a little bit. It used to just say safety-related design requirements. Now it says employee safety-related design concepts and facility responsibilities. All right, there in O.2.4, this is additional safety by design methods. And there are 12 methods that are there now that prove to be effective in reducing the risk associated with arc flash and shock. Here is an additional one method that was added that will be, hopefully will stay in there and be in the next edition of 70E. Number 13, installing high impedance protected test points for voltage measurement through the door. Committee statement on this. The technology in new item 13 helps reduce risk and enhance the effectiveness of safety-related work practices. Now, what are they talking about? High impedance protected test points for voltage measuring through the door. Bhanu, do you have any idea?
No, they call it safe test points, and yeah, absolutely. They're referring to our product. There's been a lot of confusion. I was the one who put this public input during the first public input phase, and that was discussed in the committee, and this was language that the committee decided to put in. So basically, there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace that whether these devices are allowed to use for voltage absence from outside the door, and this is what the language is about, and this is what has been given. And additionally, you need to also understand it is not just any extension of test leads. On the previous another comment, another public input that I put in, the committee also identified it is not just any test points that can be put outside the cabinet. Those must also be listed and labeled to UL 61010 standards. So this is other method of verifying for absence of voltage from outside the door. So yeah, that's what we manufacture and we sell, and most of the customers use. And Charlie recommends our product, as Charlie knows. A lot of the customers feel it's much better to use these devices in conjunction with the portable test instrument instead of opening the cabinet and performing the absence of voltage task inside the cabinet. So that's kind of the premise what it is. So I think that's pretty much it, Charlie, from our side of things. I'm gonna see if there is any questions. Okay, there's some questions people are putting. Okay. So one comment here is the equipment isn't rated for the fault current, then it is inherently not properly installed. That's comment on the normal operating condition about the fault current rating. Okay, that's a comment. So one comment is, I agree, it's not normal for an electrician to know the available fault current, right? So basically, that's basically what we talked about. It is not always obvious to everyone who is standing to know the available fault current of the cabinet.
I agree. We talked about that. It is a violation of the National Electrical Code. If you install a piece of equipment that is not rated for the fault current, and so yes, I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, there was another comment. The addition of number 3 to normal operating condition seems to be more of a limit of liability statement for 70E. Okay, that's okay. Why not change the term at the point? Okay, so why not change the term at point of work to test each phase conductor or circuit path through direct contact? Okay, that's from another manufacturer of 1436 product. So they're suggesting why not change the term at point of work to test each phase conductor circuit path through direct contact. I think that's what is already there.
Yeah,
and,
that's
it's already there.
That's there, but absolutely, anyone is free to comment on this, and if you want to change the wording, just strike out the part that you don't like and reword it. The committee will look at this, and then you add some substantiation why you think your wording is better. Absolutely.
Yep. Absolutely.
If the committee decides, all right, this is exactly what it was saying before, we'll just take out at the point of work, but they may change it to the new wording. So we talked about this before. You have till the end of May to make comments on this first draft.
Yeah, the next one is, doesn't the exception 1 currently state at the point of work? So is the proposed change trying to align this? No, it doesn't say the point of work on the exception as well. So at each point of work, it doesn't necessarily say that in the existing language. Somebody's asking to share the slides and handouts. We will absolutely do it after the webinar. Nick will be sending out the slide deck PDF and also certificate of attendance. So this is the question. Do you think machine builders will be required to label if a control panel is rated for available fault current? Absolutely. What do you think, Charlie? I think from my understanding, they need to put the available fault current on the machine panel if they
Yes,
have a power circuit. Absolutely.
get a plaque, but then it's going to take a knowledgeable person or an engineer to calculate the available fault current that's coming to that equipment. And what's coming to the equipment has to be less than the equipment is rated. But determining for an electrician or maintenance person to determine that, we're just asking for, now what this does is it really will never let turning on or off a breaker, turning on a switch, off and on. You would have to be completely suited up if your equipment is not in normal operating condition. Yep. I think that's huge.
So the next question is for you, Charlie. Can you ask the committee to change the title of Article 120 from establishing an electrically safe work condition to simply working de-energized?
Steve, you are, let's see, I don't think there was any change or any proposal to change that. There may have been. In order to make a comment after the first draft is out, there has to have been either a proposal to change something, or the committee would have had to change something. You can't just go back and add new information. Like if Article 120 something wasn't suggested on changing that before, it's too late this time. There's always the next edition, but I know Steve, he's getting a little bit older. He may not, so he's gonna kill me for that. But
I think the last one, I think the follow-up is, don't the arc flash labels indicate the fault current on it typically? If a rated plaque is present and fault current is on the arc flash label, that might resolve the issue of normal operation. I mean, do you think the label itself would suffice to state the rating of the arc fault available fault current?
To do what? Okay, repeat what you were asking, Bhanu.
So my question I'm asking is basically, somebody's asking, just by having a label, arc flash label, that defines or clearly calls out the available fault current, would that meet the requirement of the new proposed text of having rated for arc fault current in the normal operating condition?
All right, so what if everything was installed correctly? It has the plaque on the equipment, and then the utility company changed the transformer.
Yeah.
That changed, that could change something. Yeah. So, this could just be ongoing forever. But you're also, I don't think you're going to have on a regular disconnect switch or a regular panel board load center. I don't think you're going to have all these plaques all over them that show the available fault current and what the maximum available fault current is coming in and what the equipment is rated for.
Yeah, I definitely think, Charlie, I think that point again is going to have a lot of public comments, because thinking from just the perspective of the operator, that thing is, the available fault current rating is not in the hands of the qualified electrical worker, because that's beyond their control of what they see. And
and someone made a comment here, and he's absolutely true. If the utility changes the transformer, you have to update your arc flash study per NFPA 70E. Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
That is an absolutely true statement. So I don't know if that's always done, but that is correct.
All right, thank you so much. I think we're on top of the hour, so I think it was a great presentation, Charlie. Thank you so much again for putting it together, and please feel free to go into nfpa.org website, and all your comments are always welcomed. And please make sure that you put your comments. The deadline is 31st May. It's not June, 31st May 2022. So I'm sure that you will have a lot of inputs to this, and those will be definitely valuable as the committee makes a decision on the second draft. Thank you so much for your time, and great talking to you guys, and see you guys again next time. Thank you so much, Charlie. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you, Bhanu.